Nathaniel Hayes, the CEO of a billion-dollar empire, has always been a man of power and precision, known for his ruthless business tactics. One day at a cafe, he dismisses Maya, a young waitress, without a second thought. But when she speaks fluent Arabic and catches a critical mistake in a $300 million deal he's about to sign, his world is turned upside down. Maya's words challenge Nathaniel's arrogance and open his eyes to something he's been missing all along: the importance of people, humility, and real connections. What follows is a journey of self-discovery that forces Nathaniel to rethink his entire approach to business and life. In the end, it's not the deals or the power that define him, but the legacy he builds through kindness, respect, and the impact he has on those around him. This is the story of how one waitress changed the course of a billionaire's life forever. The upscale cafe, nestled in the heart of New York City, was the kind of place where the city's most influential people came to make decisions, close deals, and bask in the luxury of power. The crisp white tablecloths, polished silverware, and the hum of low conversations created an air of sophistication that catered to the elite. At one of the tables near the window sat Nathaniel Hayes, the CEO of Hayes Industries. He was a man who commanded attention wherever he went, not just because of his wealth, but because of the sheer intensity he exuded. In his mid-40s, with salt and pepper hair and piercing blue eyes, Nathaniel was known for his cutthroat business deals, and today he was in the middle of what could potentially be his biggest one yet. He was reviewing documents on his tablet, his fingers swiping across the screen in rapid succession as he mulled over figures and projections. This deal, an acquisition of a competitor, would secure Hayes Industries' dominance in the market. If everything went according to plan, it would be worth upwards of $300 million. But as engrossed as he was in the numbers, Nathaniel couldn't help but notice the waitress who had just approached his table. She was young, maybe in her early 20s, with deep brown eyes and hair pulled back into a neat ponytail. Her name tag read Maya. She smiled, waiting for him to acknowledge her presence, but Nathaniel was too absorbed in the deal to care. After a moment of awkward silence, he finally looked up, offering only a brief nod. "I'll have a double shot of espresso." "Make it quick," he said, his voice curt and impatient. "Of course, sir," Maya replied, her tone polite but unwavering, despite the dismissive air he gave her. As she turned to walk away, Nathaniel couldn't resist muttering to himself, loud enough for her to hear, "Another one of these service workers who probably doesn't even understand the business world. Not that it matters. They wouldn't know a $300 million deal if it slapped them in the face." He smirked, thinking it was just another throwaway comment. But what he didn't expect was the quiet, confident voice that came from behind him. "You'd be surprised, Mr. Hayes," Maya said, turning back with a calm smile. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow, not sure if he had heard her correctly. He looked up, a slight chuckle escaping his lips. "Excuse me?" he asked, his tone now laced with mockery. Maya met his gaze, unflinching. "I said you'd be surprised. I might just understand your deal better than you think." For a split second, Nathaniel's confidence wavered, but he quickly dismissed it, assuming she was simply trying to get a rise out of him. He returned to his tablet, his eyes fixed on the screen as Maya walked off to fetch his coffee. Nathaniel tried to refocus on his work, but the encounter with the waitress had unsettled him. He shook it off, telling himself that it was just a moment of irritation. He was used to people underestimating him, thinking they knew what was best. But today, something felt different. Maya had spoken with such certainty, as if she knew more than she let on. As she returned with his coffee, Nathaniel didn't look up. He wasn't in the mood for small talk. Maya placed the cup gently on the table in front of him, and he grunted a thank you. He could sense her presence lingering for a moment, but he didn't acknowledge her. The deal was far too important to let any distractions interfere. She turned to leave, but just before she walked away, she said, "By the way, Mr. Hayes, you might want to double-check the Arabic translation on that contract. There's a clause that could be misinterpreted." Nathaniel froze. His eyes shot up to meet hers. The calm, confident expression on her face never wavered. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice suddenly colder, more demanding. Maya took a breath, unfazed by the intensity in his gaze. "The Arabic translation. You're acquiring a company in the Middle East, right?" The clause in question, it could be misinterpreted if not worded properly. "I'd be happy to take a look if you'd like." Nathaniel blinked, taken aback by her boldness. He was a man who prided himself on knowing every detail, controlling every aspect of his deals. To hear this young waitress speaking so knowledgeably about a foreign language and a contract he was relying on was more than just surprising. It was a challenge to his authority. His lips parted as if to dismiss her, but something stopped him. The deal was important, too important to risk a mistake over something as trivial as pride. "Fine," Nathaniel said, his voice still stern but laced with curiosity. "Take a look, but don't waste my time." Maya nodded and sat down, pulling the contract from his folder and flipping through the pages. Nathaniel watched her, incredulous. How could she, a waitress, know anything about such a specialized field? But then she spoke, flipping the page and pointing to a particular clause in the contract. "See here," she said, her finger tracing the Arabic translation. "This clause is a bit vague. It doesn't capture the legal nuance of ownership. In Arabic, ownership can imply a different legal structure in some jurisdictions. You might want to specify whether it's full or partial ownership to avoid any ambiguity later on." Nathaniel felt his stomach drop. She was right. He had made a mistake, a potentially costly one. A clause that was vague in translation could lead to significant legal complications down the line, potentially costing Hayes Industries millions. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut.
"How did you?"
he began, his voice faltering for the first time. Maya didn't answer immediately, instead looking up at him with a calm, almost knowing smile. "I speak Arabic, Mr. Hayes. It's my first language." Nathaniel felt the weight of his own arrogance settling heavily in his chest. This waitress, who he had dismissed without a second thought, had just saved his entire business deal. As she stood to leave, she glanced back at him, the hint of a smile playing at the corners of her lips. "You might want to double-check the rest of your foreign contracts, too," she said, walking away with quiet confidence. Nathaniel watched her go, his mind racing. What had just happened? A waitress had done what no one else had the courage to do. She had corrected his mistake, saving him from a disastrous error that could have cost him hundreds of millions of dollars. He knew in that moment that this would be a day he would never forget. Nathaniel sat back in his chair, his mind spinning as Maya's words echoed in his ears. He had always prided himself on being meticulous, calculating, a master of his domain. Yet in a single moment, this young waitress had unraveled a critical flaw in his thinking, a mistake that could have cost him everything. He stared at the contract in front of him, the Arabic clause now glaring at him, reminding him of his own hubris. For the first time in a long while, he felt vulnerable, unsure of himself. He glanced around the cafe, trying to regain his composure, but his thoughts were still on Maya. Who was she? How had she known so much about the intricacies of foreign contracts and legal language? He had dismissed her at first, judging her based on her appearance and her role as a waitress. But now he realized how much he had underestimated her. What else could she know that he hadn't considered? His mind raced as he thought about the deal, the $300 million acquisition that hung in the balance. What if Maya had been right about more than just this one clause? What if there were other flaws he had missed? His pulse quickened as he realized the enormity of his mistake. Nathaniel felt his confidence slip away, replaced by a rare sense of uncertainty. The hours passed in a blur, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. His mind kept returning to Maya, her calm, assured demeanor, her knowledge of Arabic, the way she had spoken to him without fear or hesitation. It was almost as if she knew exactly how to handle him, as if she had seen through his exterior and recognized something he wasn't ready to acknowledge. Finally, he couldn't take it any longer. He had to know more. He stood up abruptly, grabbing his coat and heading for the door. The chilly evening air hit him as he stepped outside, and he felt a strange sense of urgency pushing him forward. He didn't know what he was hoping for, but he knew that he needed answers. He needed to know how this seemingly unassuming waitress could possess so much knowledge and confidence. Nathaniel walked briskly down the street, his thoughts tangled in a web of questions. What was it about Maya that had thrown him off balance? Was it her intelligence, her poise, or the way she had disarmed him with just a few words? After several blocks, he found himself standing outside the cafe again. It wasn't like him to follow his impulses, but something about this encounter felt different. He walked back inside, scanning the room for Maya. She was at the counter chatting with a colleague, her laughter light and carefree. For a moment, Nathaniel hesitated, unsure of what to say, unsure of what he was even doing here. But then she turned and saw him. Her eyes met his, and for a brief second, the confident smile she had worn earlier faltered. Nathaniel's heart skipped a beat, but he steadied himself. He approached her slowly, his thoughts still racing. "Maya," he said, his voice softer than he intended. She looked at him, a bit surprised, but said nothing, waiting for him to continue. I wanted to thank you," he said, his words coming out slowly, as if he were still processing everything. "You saved my deal today. You caught something that I missed, and for that I owe you." Maya smiled, a hint of amusement in her eyes. "It was the least I could do," she replied, her tone light, but Nathaniel could sense the underlying confidence in her words. "But you didn't have to," he said, still a bit thrown by how easily she had handled the situation. "You could have just let it go." "But you didn't. You spoke up, and that made all the difference." Maya tilted her head slightly, her smile widening. "Well, sometimes people need a little reminder that appearances aren't everything. A little humility goes a long way." Nathaniel blinked, taken aback by her words. She had spoken the truth, but it stung in a way he hadn't expected. He had spent years building his empire, maintaining control, but here she was, reminding him of a simple truth he had long forgotten. Humility. "You're right," he said quietly, feeling the weight of her words. "I spent so much time trying to be the best at everything that I forgot how to listen, how to learn from others. You've reminded me of that." Maya's smile softened and she stepped closer. "Everyone has something to teach, Mr. Hayes. You don't have to do it all alone." Nathaniel felt a strange warmth spread through him as he looked at her. He had been surrounded by people for years, but none had ever made him feel this way. She had done more than just save his deal. She had awakened something in him that he had long ignored, the power of collaboration, the value of listening, and the humility to accept help. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice steady now, "about what you said, about the contract. You were right. I need to learn more about international law, about cultural nuances, about the things I can't just learn from books or experience alone." Maya looked at him, her eyes filled with an understanding that seemed beyond her years. "It's not just about the contracts or the business. It's about connecting with people, understanding them. You can't lead if you don't know who you're leading, Nathaniel." Nathaniel's breath caught at the sound of his first name coming from her lips. It felt strange, but somehow natural. He had always been known as Mr. Hayes, the untouchable CEO, the man who made things happen. But here, in this quiet cafe, in front of this waitress who had turned his world upside down, he felt like a man again, not just a leader. "I'd like to learn more," he said, his voice firm. "About Arabic, about international business, about working with people. Would you be willing to teach me?" Maya's eyes softened, and for the first time that day, Nathaniel saw a glimpse of something else in her. Something not just confident, but kind. "I'd be happy to," she said, her smile genuine. "But only if you promise to stop dismissing people based on their job title." Nathaniel chuckled, the sound genuine and unforced. "I promise." The weight that had been pressing on him all day seemed to lift, and for the first time in a long while, Nathaniel felt at peace with the world. Maya had not only saved his deal, but had opened his eyes to a different way of thinking, a new way of seeing the world, and for that he would be forever grateful. As they parted ways that evening, Nathaniel couldn't help but feel that this encounter, this chance meeting with a waitress, had changed him in ways he couldn't yet fully understand. But he knew one thing for sure: his life, his business, and his approach to the world would never be the same again. Nathaniel woke up the next morning with a strange feeling that lingered in the pit of his stomach. The events of yesterday, the conversation with Maya, her unexpected wisdom, and the realization of his own limitations had replayed in his mind all night. He was used to being in control, always the one with the answers, but something about Maya's perspective had shaken him. He knew he had to make changes, but where to start? As the day progressed, Nathaniel couldn't shake the feeling that his life had been turned upside down in the best possible way. He had always been a man of logic and reason, relying on his sharp mind to solve problems and close deals. But Maya had taught him something invaluable: that sometimes true understanding didn't come from being the smartest person in the room, but from being open to the wisdom of others, no matter where it came from. That evening, Nathaniel found himself sitting at his desk, the usual clutter of papers and contracts surrounding him, but his mind was far from focused on the numbers. His thoughts were consumed by one question: how could he apply what Maya had taught him to his company? He had always been driven by success, by the desire to build an empire, but now he was questioning whether his methods were truly the right ones. He glanced at his phone and saw a message from his assistant, reminding him of the upcoming board meeting. He had a big presentation scheduled, and his thoughts briefly returned to the deal he was in the process of finalizing. But as he prepared for the meeting, something inside him told him that this wasn't just about the deal anymore. This was about the way he interacted with people, about the relationships he had built and the ones he had neglected. He was beginning to see things differently, and it scared him. It scared him because he didn't know where this journey would take him, but at the same time, it excited him. That night, Nathaniel stayed late at the office, working through his thoughts and making a list of the changes he wanted to make. He realized that it wasn't enough to just fix the mistakes in his contracts or his business dealings. He had to change the way he saw people. He had to stop dismissing others based on their titles or appearances and start listening, truly listening, to what they had to offer. Maya had shown him that everyone had something valuable to contribute, and he was determined to embrace that philosophy moving forward. The next morning, Nathaniel sent a message to his assistant asking her to reschedule the board meeting for the following week. He wasn't ready for it yet. Instead, he made another call, the one that had been on his mind ever since he met Maya. He dialed the number he had gotten from his assistant, the one that belonged to the cafe where Maya worked. The phone rang twice before someone picked up.
"Hello?"
came the voice on the other end. "Hi, is Maya there?" Nathaniel asked, trying to sound casual, but there was a nervous edge to his voice. "Maya?" The voice hesitated. "Oh, you must be referring to the waitress who was here yesterday. She doesn't work today, but I can pass along a message." Nathaniel paused, unsure of how to proceed. He had never done anything like this before. "Actually, could you let her know I'd like to speak with her? It's important." The voice on the other end agreed and promised to pass along the message. Nathaniel hung up, feeling a sense of anticipation in his chest. He had no idea what he was going to say to her, but he knew one thing for sure: his encounter with Maya had set something in motion that he couldn't ignore. Several hours later, Nathaniel's phone buzzed with a message from Maya. "I hear you wanted to speak to me," she wrote. "How can I help?" His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he considered how to respond. This was the moment, the one that could either solidify his newfound perspective or send him back to his old ways. With a deep breath, he typed, "I wanted to thank you again for what you did yesterday. You opened my eyes to something I've been missing, and I need your help. Would you be willing to meet me tomorrow to discuss something important?" He hit send, feeling a mix of hope and uncertainty. This wasn't just about the business deal anymore. This was about his growth, his willingness to change, and whether Maya was willing to be a part of that transformation. An hour later, he received her response. Sure, tomorrow works. I'll meet you at the same cafe. Nathaniel smiled to himself, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over him. He didn't know where this conversation would lead, but he was ready to face whatever came next. The following day, he met Maya at the cafe once again. This time, there was no coldness between them, no pretense. It was just two people, sitting across from each other, ready to have an honest conversation. Maya greeted him with her usual warm smile, but this time, there was a different energy in the air. Nathaniel didn't waste any time. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation yesterday," he said, his voice steady but filled with genuine curiosity. "About what you said, about how I've been running things, and I realized that I need to change." Maya raised an eyebrow, her interest piqued. "Change? What do you mean?" Nathaniel took a deep breath, his eyes meeting hers. "I've spent so much time focused on success, on building my empire, that I've forgotten what really matters. People. I've been blind to the fact that it's not just about the deals or the money. It's about the relationships, the way we connect with others." Maya nodded slowly, her eyes thoughtful. "It's easy to get caught up in the chase for success," she said softly. "But success without meaningful connections isn't really success at all." Nathaniel smiled, feeling the weight of her words sink in. "Exactly. And that's where I need your help. I want to learn more. I want to understand how to truly connect with people, how to lead with humility, how to listen, how to value everyone no matter their title or background." Maya looked at him, her expression softening. "You're already on the right path, Nathaniel. You're willing to learn, and that's the first step." Nathaniel felt a surge of gratitude towards her. She had given him the clarity he needed, the courage to face the areas of his life that had been neglected for so long. "Thank you, Maya," he said sincerely. "For everything." She smiled, her eyes gleaming with a quiet pride. "You don't need to thank me. You just need to keep moving forward." And as they sat together, sharing a quiet moment of understanding, Nathaniel knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in his life, one where success would no longer be defined by the size of his empire, but by the quality of the relationships he built along the way. The days following Nathaniel's conversation with Maya felt like a blur. He spent every waking moment contemplating the changes he had promised to make, analyzing his actions, his relationships, and the way he led his company. It wasn't easy. Old habits die hard, and Nathaniel found himself slipping back into his old ways at times, impatient, dismissive, focused solely on the numbers. But each time he did, Maya's words would echo in his mind, reminding him of what really mattered. He knew that he couldn't just talk about change. He had to live it. The first test came sooner than expected. Nathaniel was scheduled to meet with a potential investor, a high-profile businessman who had the power to take Hayes Industries to the next level. This was the kind of meeting that would normally have Nathaniel on edge, determined to impress, to seal the deal at any cost. But this time, he wasn't just thinking about the money. He was thinking about how he wanted to approach the conversation, how he could connect with this investor on a human level, rather than just treating him as a stepping stone to further success. As the investor entered the room, Nathaniel stood up to greet him, offering a handshake. But instead of launching straight into the pitch, he took a moment to ask about the investor's background, his interests, and his experiences. The conversation flowed naturally, and Nathaniel found himself genuinely interested in what the investor had to say. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't just thinking about how to make the deal work for him, he was thinking about how to make it work for both of them. The meeting ended on a positive note, with the investor expressing interest in moving forward. As Nathaniel walked him out, he couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment, not because the deal was sealed, but because he had approached it in a way that felt right. He had built a genuine connection, something he hadn't done in years. That night, Nathaniel sat in his office, reflecting on the day's events. He realized that Maya's influence had seeped into every aspect of his life. She had taught him to see people, not as means to an end, but as partners, as individuals with their own stories, their own needs, and their own value. It was a humbling experience, one that made him question the very foundation of his success. Was it enough to be rich, powerful, and successful? Or did true success lie in the relationships you built, the lives you touched, and the legacy you left behind? Nathaniel didn't have all the answers, but he knew he was on the right path. The next morning, as he walked into his office, he saw Maya's message pop up on his phone. "I hope you're doing well," it read. "Just wanted to check in and see how everything's going." Nathaniel smiled to himself. Maya had become more than just a waitress to him. She had become a mentor, a guide, someone who had shown him a new way of thinking, a new way of living. He tapped out a response. "Things are going well. Thanks to you." He hit send and leaned back in his chair, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. For the first time in years, Nathaniel Hayes wasn't thinking about the next deal, the next acquisition, or the next big step. He was thinking about the people around him, the connections he had made, and the future he was building, not just for himself, but for everyone involved. And for the first time in his life, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The following week, Nathaniel took another step toward change. He called Maya and asked if they could meet again. He had spent the last few days mulling over everything she had taught him, and he felt it was time to share his progress. When they met, Maya greeted him with the same warm smile, but Nathaniel could see a change in her too. There was a quiet pride in her eyes, as though she knew the impact she had made. "I've been thinking a lot," Nathaniel said as they sat down together, "about everything you said, about how I lead, about how I've been running my life. I feel like I'm finally starting to see things clearly." Maya nodded, waiting for him to continue. "I've changed my approach to business, to relationships, to people," Nathaniel continued. "It's not just about making deals anymore. It's about building real connections, about valuing people for who they are, not just for what they can give me." Maya's smile widened. "I'm glad to hear that, Nathaniel. It's not easy to change the way you've always done things, but it's the only way to build something meaningful." Nathaniel took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words sink in. "I've also been thinking about the future. I don't want to just be a CEO anymore. I want to be someone who makes a difference, who creates something lasting, something that matters. I want to build a legacy, but not just a financial one. I want to be remembered for how I treated people, for how I helped others grow, for the impact I had on the world." Maya looked at him, her eyes filled with understanding. "You're on the right path, Nathaniel. It's not about the money, it's about what you do with it, how you use your influence to make the world a better place. And the fact that you're thinking about these things shows that you're already a different person than the one you were when we first met." Nathaniel felt a sense of gratitude swell in his chest. He had come a long way since that day in the cafe, when he had dismissed Maya and thought he knew everything. Now he was seeing the world through a different lens, and it felt like the weight of the world had been lifted off his shoulders. "Thank you, Maya," Nathaniel said, his voice sincere, "for everything. You've shown me a side of myself that I never knew existed, and I'll be forever grateful for that." Maya smiled, her expression softening. "You don't need to thank me. You did the hard work yourself. I just pointed you in the right direction." Nathaniel smiled back, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just focused on the future. He was focused on the present, on the people around him, and on building something meaningful. He knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but with Maya's guidance, he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they stood up to leave, Nathaniel felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey he had undertaken. Maya had opened his eyes to a new way of thinking, and he was ready to take that knowledge and use it to make a difference. He wasn't just a billionaire CEO anymore. He was someone who truly understood the value of people, of relationships, and of the impact he could have on the world. And that was the greatest success of all. Nathaniel woke up with a sense of clarity that he hadn't felt in years. The journey he had embarked on, one that started with a simple encounter with Maya, had transformed him in ways he never could have imagined. The lessons she had taught him were no longer just abstract concepts. They were now embedded in his every action, in the way he conducted business and in the way he interacted with people. He had learned to lead with humility, to listen with intent, and to value the relationships that formed the backbone of any successful venture. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just thinking about profit margins and acquisitions. He was thinking about the bigger picture, the impact he could have on the world, the difference he could make in the lives of those around him. It wasn't just about the legacy of Hayes Industries anymore. It was about the legacy he would leave as a person. As the weeks passed, Nathaniel found himself making significant changes within his company. He began to prioritize relationships over deals, recognizing that the people he worked with were just as important as the deals he struck. He started to involve his employees in decision-making, valuing their input and giving them a sense of ownership in the company's success. The results were immediate. Morale within the company skyrocketed and productivity reached new heights. People were more engaged, more motivated, and more loyal to the company than ever before. Nathaniel realized that the culture he had fostered, one of competition and individualism, had been holding his company back. By shifting his focus to collaboration and respect, he had unlocked a level of potential that he hadn't known existed. It wasn't just about the numbers anymore. It was about the people who made those numbers possible. One day, Nathaniel invited Maya to lunch at the same cafe where they had first met. He had something important to tell her, something he had been thinking about for weeks. As they sat across from each other, Maya noticed the change in Nathaniel. There was a calmness about him now, a sense of peace that had replaced the urgency and tension that used to define him. She smiled as she took a sip of her coffee, waiting for him to speak. "I wanted to thank you again, Maya," Nathaniel began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've made some big changes in my life, in my company, but none of it would have been possible without you. You've shown me what true leadership looks like. You've taught me how to be a better person, a better leader, and a better human being." Maya looked at him, her eyes filled with warmth. "You did all the hard work, Nathaniel. I just helped you see it. You were always capable of this change. You just needed to believe in yourself." Nathaniel nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. "I believe in myself now," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "And more importantly, I believe in the people around me. I've learned that true success isn't measured by the size of my company or the amount of money I make. It's measured by the impact I have on others, the way I treat the people who help me build this empire." Maya smiled, her eyes sparkling. "That's the kind of success that lasts, Nathaniel. The kind that touches lives and changes the world for the better." Nathaniel felt a sense of gratitude wash over him. He had started this journey as a businessman, a man focused solely on his career and his wealth. But now he was something more. He was a man who understood the value of people, who recognized that success wasn't just about what you achieved, but how you achieved it. He knew that his life had changed forever, and he owed it all to a chance. Encounter with a waitress who had the courage to speak up and remind him of what truly mattered. As they finished their lunch, Nathaniel made a promise to himself. He would continue to lead with integrity, with compassion, and with respect for those around him. He would use his success to help others, to create opportunities, and to make the world a better place. And as he looked across the table at Maya, he knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter in his life. A chapter where success was measured not by the bottom line, but by the difference he made in the lives of others. A few months later, Nathaniel stood in front of a crowd at a charity event his company had organized. It was a new initiative, one that focused on providing scholarships for underprivileged students and supporting local communities. As he spoke to the audience, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of fulfillment. This was the legacy he had been searching for, the kind of success that came from helping others, from giving back to the community, and from making a positive impact on the world. Maya once told me that true success isn't just about what you achieve, Nathaniel said, his voice steady and filled with emotion. It's about how you help others achieve their dreams. And today, we're here to make that happen. We're here to change lives, to give back to those who need it most, and to create a future where success is defined by the good we do for others. The crowd erupted into applause, and Nathaniel felt a sense of pride swell in his chest. This was the work that mattered, the work that would outlast any deal, any acquisition, any dollar amount. This was the legacy he wanted to leave behind, and as he looked around the room, he knew that Maya's influence had changed the trajectory of his life. She had shown him that true success wasn't about building an empire. It was about building relationships, lifting others up, and leaving the world better than you found it. As the event drew to a close, Nathaniel looked out over the crowd, a sense of peace settling over him. He had finally found the answer to the question that had haunted him for so long. True success, he realized, was about leaving a legacy of kindness, integrity, and compassion. It was about making a difference, not just for yourself, but for everyone whose life you touched. And with that thought, Nathaniel Hayes knew that he had achieved something far more valuable than any business deal could ever offer. He had found purpose, and with it, the legacy he had always dreamed of.